Good morning, Jaguars. This is Friday's lesson. We are looking at Module 1, Lesson 10. And when we are looking at our lesson, we're going to be looking at rounding numbers using real-world applications. Now, when we talk about real-world applications, that means we are looking at how can we use rounding to apply to something that's happening in real life. Now, the things to think about throughout this lesson is, will there be enough? So you want to think about how much is needed based on your question and compare it to your rounded number. Just think, if you need a certain amount of something and you round it, is it better to have more of it or less? Okay? So before we even do that, we're going to start to think. Why do we round numbers? Take this time to pause the video and think about why we round numbers. Because it's very weird that we're doing it, okay? So take about 30 seconds, pause the video, take 30 seconds, and then come right back, okay? All right. So why do we round numbers? Well, when we round them, it's easier to look at. So it, or the numbers, are easier to look at. Okay, when we have so many different numbers on one single number, it makes it harder to read it. But if we say that, if we use the word there is about, that word about means to estimate. So there's about means the estimated number. So we're looking at a lot of zeros when we're rounding numbers, okay? The more zeros we have, the easier it is to do math, okay? And the more zeros we have, the better our rounded number would be. If we're just rounding to the tens place to make something more accurate, it doesn't really help us. Next, number 2. It is easier to add or subtract. Oopsie. Easier to add or subtract. When you're adding or subtracting with zeros, it makes it so much easier. Okay? For example, if we just have 3,000 minus 2,000, we know that all of these zeros subtracted from each other will equal 0. And then we just have 3 minus 2, which equals 1. When we add or subtract with zeros, it makes life so much easier. Okay, and lastly, we round to find an estimate of a number. Thinking about how much is needed, or about how much is needed. Okay, when we're thinking of a number and trying to buy something, the more zeros we have, the better. But remember, you got to make sure you think about, will there be enough when you round your number? So we're going to take a look at an example. And we're going to look at this example. So here we have Spanaway Elementary has 427 students. The school wants new iPads for each student. They rounded to the nearest 100 to estimate the order. Will there be enough iPads? Explain. So, if we're looking at the problem, okay, they're saying that we have 427 students. Now, if they're rounding to the hundreds place, we're going to look next door. So that would equal about 400 iPads. Now, if the school orders 400 iPads, is that enough for the 427 students? Think about it. How many students will end up without iPads if they round it to 400? Well, now the answer, I want you to think about it, pause, and then come back when you're ready. Okay, so if the school orders 400 iPads, now I know that it's less than that number. So what's going to happen? There are students who are not going to have it. So how do I figure that out? We're going to do 427 minus 400. There'll be 27 students without iPads. So if the school orders 400 iPads, 27 students will not have iPads. Okay, so then what would be a better number to round to? I want you to think, if rounding to the hundreds didn't work, what would be a better place value to round it to? Well, we can always round it going up, or we're going to use the tens. So we look next door, that's a 7. So if we round it to that, 427, rounding to the nearest 10, it's about 430. With that, we will have more iPad, or we'll have enough iPads. Okay? Now, one more thing. Let's say that the school only had 423 students, and they want the new iPads for that many. Well, if we round to the hundreds, that would equal 400. That's not enough iPads. If we round 423 to the tens, that would be 420 iPads. That's still not enough. And if we want that rounded number, we can't just say order 423. So we can always just say from 423, they could order 430 iPads and round that up anyways so that they make sure that they have enough. Okay? Last one that we're going to try. This one is going to be in your blue math book. We're going to look at number 4. So if you have your blue math book, you can follow along. If you don't, then make sure that you're following along. I'm going to give you a second to read it to yourself. All right. So we're seeing that opening day at the New York State Fair is in 2012 had an attendance of 46,753. Decide which place value to round 46,753 to if you're thinking about writing a newspaper article. Round the number and explain why it is an appropriate unit to round the attendance to. So let's see. If we're going to round 46,753, and let's say we're going to look at rounding to the 10,000s. Okay? Well, looking at the 10,000s, we look at the thousands, that's a 6. So we add 1 to our 10,000s. We could say that there was about 50,000 people. If we round to the thousands place, we could see that there would end up being about 47,000 people. The hundreds would be 46,800 people. And the tens would be 46,760 people. Now, when writing a newspaper article, which number do you think would be the best unit to round to? Well, looking at an attendance, okay, we want it to be closer to the actual number. So if we look at 50,000, that is a lot higher than 46,000. So to find out, we would subtract it. Okay, I'll give you some time to subtract. You can pause, or you can just play and continue. But the answer for this would end up being about, let's see, 7, 4, 2. That's about 3,247 difference. While for 47,000 people, if we subtract our original number, that's only going to be 247 people. So I know for a fact that this number would be better. Sure, if we continue down the line, okay, we would only have, or we're going to end up having less, so that would be 47. But we want more zeros, okay? Because it's an easier number to round to. It's closer to the thousands place than anything else, or the 10,000s, okay? So when rounding, the more zeros we have, the better. So now explain why it's an appropriate unit. So I would round to the nearest 1,000 because it is closer to the real number and has more zeros. It's easier to look at, okay? All right. Be sure to look at the problems below, but if you want to know, you're going to be looking at story problem number 3 and story problem number 5. Okay, just those 2 problems. Okay, well, that's it. If you have any questions, make sure you send me a message. Take care.